Hello, everyone, on this beautiful spring day. Welcome to Your Money Map, sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income. I am sure that everybody here today is just ready to take a breath, enjoy this amazing spate of weather that we're having, and dig into an important conversation about financial education, about what we really need to know about money, about how best to learn this language if we feel that we don't know it, and about how to teach it to the other important people in our lives, our kids, our spouses, how to have those important conversations. My guest today is no stranger to many of you. Tiffany Aliche is an award-winning teacher of personal financial education. She is quickly becoming one of the most famous personal advice experts out there, personal finance experts out there, and she has made it her mission to empower women and provide them with access to tools and the resources that they need to create a better life for themselves and for their families. Tiffany, welcome.
Thank you, Jean. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. This is a big month for you.
It is indeed.
It is indeed, she says teasingly. It's a big month for you because your first your first book that's not a children's book, and your children's book is excellent, but your book is coming out at the end of the month, and I understand that you might be able to give us a sneak peek.
And yes, it came in the mail yesterday. I was super excited. It's called Get Good with Money, 10 Simple Steps to Becoming Financially Whole. And it's just been a labor of love. I've written books before, but they've all been self-published. This is my first official book. And yeah, you can get it at getgoodwithmoney.com.
Well, thank you for sharing it with us. It's a beautiful picture of you on the cover, but I'm sure that the advice in those pages is priceless. I am thrilled to have you here today. I think there are no topics that we have discovered are as important as managing your personal finances and, as you say, becoming financially whole during the pandemic. It's been a pain point for a lot of people. When you think about that subtitle, about becoming financially whole, what does that mean to you?
So to me, financial wholeness is when the core 10 aspects of your financial life are working together to collectively create this really strong financial foundation. Right. So many people strive toward or they succeed in their finances in silos. I'm sure you've seen, Jean, right. They'll have great credit, but no savings. Yeah. They'll have savings, but no budget. They have a budget, but they're not investing. And I thought, well, I wanted to come at personal finance from a holistic view of your finances, because if you take care of these 10 components, they will take care of you and the rest of your financial goals.
Love that. Love that. I want to welcome our audience as well on Facebook and LinkedIn. We're already getting some comments. Say hi to Michelle and Marcella. Thank you guys so much for being here with us today. If you've got questions as Tiffany and I embark on this conversation, we are here to answer them. So just tee them on up in the chat. We'll pull them down. If you've got comments as well, we want to hear them because participating in discussions about your personal finances, about your money, that is just one really, really great way to get started. Tiffany, let's talk about financial education, financial literacy. I mean, I think they're actually two separate components. Where are we in the quest for financial education and financial literacy in this country?
Well, where we are is that there are some states that do have some financial literacy laws on the books. The state that I'm in, New Jersey, is one of them, and one of the most progressive ones. We've had a law for many years for that made it mandatory to have financial education in high schools. And just most recently, a law was passed in January 2019. Myself and Assemblywoman Angela V. McKnight, we got together to write this bill. A1414, and she worked tirelessly and was able to get that law passed. We call it the Budgetnista Law, but it makes financial education mandatory in middle schools in the state of New Jersey. So right now, Jean, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing state by state kind of integrating those laws, but certainly we're not seeing it across all 50 states just yet. And we have not seen anything from the federal level.
You reached down to younger children when you worked on that law. You already had financial education in place for high school students, and you said, nope, not early enough. Why is that? And where would you like to see it get started?
Well, honestly, originally I was a little disappointed because originally the bill that we came up with was really to start financial education in kindergarten in a way that was age appropriate. But unfortunately, folks involved pushed back, and they just felt it was too young. And as someone who's taught preschool for 10 years, I have my master's in education. It's not too young. And I believe that financial education should start as soon as children start to say things like, can you buy me? Not just can I have, right? So not can I have this? Can you give me this? But can you buy me? Because that means that child has made a connection, that they recognize that you're spending money for things. They've already made that connection, and you want to make sure that's the kind of connection that you want them to have. So I've got a niece, she's 3, so she's not quite saying that yet, but my nephew, Roman, he's 5, but he's starting to say, Auntie, can you buy me this? Can you buy me that? That means I'm like, okay, so let's talk about what does that kind of look like? When I taught preschool, every preschool classroom gives children little jobs. Like you set the table, you help with the cots. So I used to make that their actual job, and then I would pay them in Monopoly money, so they could start to see the flow of things, that like you did a really good job, you got $2 a day. If you did an okay job, you got $1 that day. And if you decided you didn't want to do your job, you got $0. And then you put your money that you made into a shoebox, which we used to call their bank account. And then we would put their bank account. We had a little area in the classroom that we used to call their bank. So they would be depositing their money into their bank account and putting their bank account in their bank. And every other week, they were allowed to withdraw money and shop at the school store with their Monopoly money. But that is age appropriate for kindergartners and preschoolers. And so I'm hoping that as this middle school law continues to play itself out, they can see that it's important for it to start as soon as possible, so we can normalize talking about money, so we don't have adults who are confused about credit and debt and how to navigate their finances. And it makes it so much harder when you have a family to take care of and when you're a little bit older.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges, I think, for parents who feel as if they don't perhaps understand their money well enough themselves is that it's often on parents without financial literacy ubiquitous in our country's schools. It's often on parents to teach these lessons. I think during the pandemic, when so many people have been suffering financially, we've had this great opportunity to have these conversations at our dinner tables and at our breakfast tables. I wonder if you think families are taking advantage of those.
I think some families are, because you're spending way more time with your kids. And unfortunately, so many families are experiencing a reduction in income, being furloughed, being let go. So you have to have these honest conversations with your children about why certain things that used to happen can no longer happen. So I do believe that there are families that are taking advantage of this closeness at home, plus the unfortunate reality that there's not as much money to go around. So I do believe that's happening. And this is why creating age appropriate financial education tools is so critical. So when I wrote my first children's book, it's a financial education book for children ages 3 to 7. Happy birthday, Molly Moore. At the back of the book, I also had extended lesson questions and activities, because I knew that the adult reader that might be reading this book to a child is going to need help. Yeah. They're going to need to know, like, okay, how do I extend this lesson? So I wanted to give them the tools to do so. And so there are resources and tools, and there are a lot of free resources and tools online for parents to lean into.
I was just going to say that for years now, for 5-6 years now, I've worked on a in-school magazine called Your Money that we produce in concert with Time for Kids. And every issue of that. It goes out with the issues of Time for Kids. They're all online. They're all free online, and they all come with a teacher and family guide that can help you craft some of these lessons at home or have these discussions at the dinner table. So for parents of slightly older children, ours was aimed at fourth, fifth, and sixth graders. That's a free resource to access as well. I know that your community, Tiffany, as the Budgetnista, you've built this huge community of dream catchers. A big shout out if there are any dream catchers watching us today. You have said that with women, it is a confidence issue. Money is a confidence issue. It's not a capability issue. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So, as someone who's taught for a number of years, sometimes, you're working with a student and you know that, they're not quite ready for this lesson. And then you notice that there are students that are beyond ready for the lesson. They are able, they are capable, but because they lack the confidence, they're actually holding themselves back. And I see that time and time again when it comes to women and money. You have been told for so long it's something that's hard for women. It's like STEM, right? This is why there's this big, huge push for STEM. Women are more than capable of doing science and math and money and engineering and technology. But unfortunately, because of the cultural norms that we experience, we're often told that those are things for boys, And so that's just not true. And so one of the reasons why I started the Budgetnista, my business, is because I wanted to help instill not only the knowledge, but the confidence that you are able, you are capable. You're a mom. Do you know how hard it is to be a mom? Believe me, money is way easier. You get dressed every day. You're a daughter, you're an aunt, you're a sister. You go to work. Maybe you go to church. Like, women are already doing things in their lives that are way more complicated than managing money. And they're doing them easily. They're doing them, regularly. And so they've told themselves, oh, well, I could do that, but I can't do this. No, some of those skill sets are the same. So having to bridge the gap so women can see that you are more than capable and all you need is the confidence. And so that's why things like this is so important. It's important that women see us because, it helps to model good behavior, but it also helps for them to realize, well, wow, if Jean can do it, if Tiffany can do it, she's like me, so maybe I'm capable as well. And you are.
100%. And that's why I sort of like to point out whenever I get the chance that I am not an economist and I'm not a financial planner. I was an English major in college, and I just learned this by doing my job of reporting on personal finance. It does get easier, but sometimes I think it's hard, bless you, to take those first steps. So when we're thinking about getting from a place where we are able to run.
Excuse me.
Bless you. Oh my goodness. I was telling Tiffany, for everybody watching, and by the way, it is spring, but that means it is 100%.
And I have allergies. I do have allergies. I'm like,
I'm sniffing. So you'll take over when I and we'll just go from there. When we try to get people to a position where they feel competent, we have to bring them through almost a funnel where you do one thing and then you do another thing and then you do another thing. I know you're a big fan of these quick steps. How do we get started?
So when it comes to get starting with money, I like to start with mindset shift, right? Because it's going to be very difficult to maintain any sort of new money habits if you haven't shifted your mindset. So a quick money mindset shift is to every day today or all day today, as you are making financial choices, I want you to stop and ask yourself kind of like, what's playing in your head? So you buy something on Amazon, what thoughts are happening in my head? Like, oh, I can't wait to get this thing, or I can't afford this thing, or, oh, I shouldn't get this thing, and determine if your mindset is one of positivity or negativity when it comes to money. Just doing that just can make you aware of like, wow, whenever I think about purchasing something, I tend to lean toward the negative. So then you could practice stopping for a moment, pausing, and asking yourself, what is the opposite positive reaction to what I'm doing? Like, for example, I really wanted a Peloton bike for like the last year or so. And my husband heard me telling my sister, oh, I really want one, but it's so expensive. And what I was really saying is that I felt it was too expensive for me, because friends of mine have gotten Pelotons and I've celebrated with them. Like, oh my goodness, that's awesome. So why is it awesome for them to treat themselves to this bike? But for me, it's expensive, not because I couldn't afford it, because I can. But what I was really saying is, oh, I have this like mental mindset that I don't deserve that thing, you know? And so
Right.
once I noticed that, I said, oh, wow, Tiffany, okay, this is the negative speak sometimes you have when it comes to money. Because I grew up in a really frugal household. So everything was like, no, 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 no. We can't have that. No, 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 no. It's just too much. So I've told myself, I'm not deserving of spending money on myself. And so that's something that I work through. So every time I think of a thing, I try to pause for a moment and say, Tiffany, what are you really saying? And what is the positive reaction to that? And so that's like a mental money quick step that you can do, a quick start that you can do to start your money mindset. And then, Jean, you always want to ease on over. As soon as you get your mindset flowing, I mean, no one likes the word budget, but it is critically important. Whatever you call it, money list, money plan, either way, your budget is a physical picture of what your money is doing. And so a quick start to a budget, so my husband's not the greatest at budgeting. And so I tried to figure out a way for him to budget without a budget. And so if you're just like, you know what, I don't want to track funds, I don't want to create the spreadsheet, I don't want to do so. A really great quick start is to go to HR after you've done just a little bit of math and determine how much you want to split. I like to split my money into 4 buckets: a spending bucket, so you're kind of like your allowance, a bills bucket. So this is where you're going to pay bills out of. So 2 checking accounts, a savings bucket for emergencies, and a savings bucket for goals. And so I told him, go to HR. We did a little math and said, this is how much he's going to take for allowance for himself to spend as he'd like. This is how much he's going to put toward bills for the household. This is how much he's going to put toward our joint emergency savings. And this is how much he's going to put toward our goal savings. And so it was a budget without budgeting, Jean. So that's a really quick start, because the money came in. It's split into these 4 buckets. All he had to worry about was that first checking account that he can spend money on himself. Everything else was taken care of. And so that's 2 really quick starts: stopping, pausing, thinking, and budget without budgeting.
I love that. And I do a version of that in my house. I know what my spending goals, not my spending goals, I know what my savings goals are. Mm-hmm. And as long as I satisfy those first, then everything else flows from there. Okay. Right? As long as you satisfy your savings goals and you don't sink into credit card debt, you're fine, because you're living within your means by definition. And exactly. I think that works. When you have been taking the pulse of your community this year, how are they feeling about their futures? How are they feeling about retirement in particular?
So for my community, there's a lot of worry, and I think that's just so for everyone. There wasn't as much worry before, but quarantine, pandemic, loss of wages have left a lot of people really worried, and so much so that they have kind of decided to put off retirement planning in favor of, what can I do now? Student loan debt has taken over. What are we going to do when these moratoriums are lifted and we have to pay our mortgage and student loan debt again? How am I just going to make it day to day? Because I don't have enough money to manage just even my day-to-day household. So a lot of folks have put pause on retirement because they're just trying to keep their head above water right now.
How are you going to bring them back from that? I know that your motto is live richer.
Yes.
Right? And living richer, first of all, I love the idea of that, but that's something that you want to be able to sustain, not just during your working years while you know that the paycheck is going to continue to come, but once you slow down, once you have saved enough money, once you can see the next phase of your life. How do you get people from this place of fear to living richer sustainably?
So one of the things I remind folks is that, I play this game. So there was this study done that found one of the reasons why folks have a hard time setting aside for retirement is that they are disassociated from their older self. So, you almost look at your child self as like another child, not as pre you, who you are now. But the same thing happens when you're older. And I thought, what if we actually leaned into that? What if I said, you're right, I'm going to think of my older self as a separate person. So I call my older self, my 70-year-old self, I call her Wanda. And my audience loves that. And I just imagine Wanda as a sassy old lady that cannot be told what to do. So when I'm making choices now, I actually try to imagine, what would Wanda need, to be okay. And so I'll tease them and I'm like, I understand, because one of my friends, her old lady self is Gertrude. And I'm just like, I understand that things are hard now, but it will be even harder for Gertrude, because at least you're young enough now to work, to get creative, to learn to earn, to cut back. And so that's how I bring the conversation back around, because thinking about it that way low is a little anxiety, because we can all laugh about our old lady names, but also really asking yourself, like, if you think of like your old lady self almost like living with your grandmother, you would not, even if you're struggling now, you're having a hard time, you would not put that onus on your grandmother if you had a 70, 80-year-old grandmother that was living with you.
Right.
You would not say, well, honestly, grandma, like, we have to eat now, so there's just not enough food for you. You would be like, I have to figure out a way, because we have to make grandma, who she's not capable of taking care of herself as fully as I am now. She's limited in what she's able to do. And so that's how I bring the conversation back around. Like, that, like, imagine your older lady self and in her 70s, imagine her as an extension of yourself, almost like your grandmother who is currently living with you now. What would you do if you had to take care of her now? Because you are taking care of her now. The choices that you make now are affecting what Wanda's going to eat, what Gertrude is going to eat, what Susan is going to eat later on down the line.
Yeah, I'm in my head now. I'm thinking about what my old lady name is going to be. And I want everybody who's listening to us, put your old lady names in the chat.
Yes.
I'm thinking maybe Mavis. What do you think?
Oh, I like that. I like that name.
I don't know why. I don't think I've ever met anybody named Mavis.
I met one person in college. Her name was Mavis.
Just popped into my head. So Mavis it's going to be, but you're absolutely right. And there's a lot of behavioral research about this, that not only do we have trouble identifying with ourselves 30, 40 years down the road, but also if we can visualize it,
yes,
then we can do it. If we can see it, we can be it. And what you're doing with Gertrude and Mavis and Wanda is giving us this amazing visual image. And I think there is a ton of wisdom in that. Let's come back to the language thing for a second, because I do think that when we talk about money, we are talking in, for many people, a foreign language, and there are a lot of organizations that have taken steps to combat that. The Alliance for Lifetime Income, which sponsors this webinar on a biweekly basis, it just released the second edition of their language glossary for annuities, because it's a product that many people don't understand. But there are a lot of things that are even more basic than that people don't understand. So how do you advise your community to deal with it when you come up against something that a term you don't know, an instrument that you don't understand, an investment that you find is a little bit head scratching? How do you deal?
So I teach my community to learn how to ask for help. Right. And so one of the reasons why I created an actual community, I have this Facebook group where it's about 500,000 women. And so we normalize asking for help, because it's really hard for adults to ask for financial help, because you feel like as an adult, you ought to know. And somehow if you don't know, then there must be something wrong. But what I do is I model good behavior, in that if I don't know a thing, I'll say, I just learned this word. Did you know that, ETFs, stand for exchange traded funds? And really, it's like the soul child of a stock and a mutual fund. You know what I mean? Like, so then I also even as I'm learning a thing, we model good behavior. Like, one of our rules in this Facebook group is to show your work, like literally like how I used to learn in school. So as you are explaining, say, for example, you're like, I just purchased a home. then you can't just say, everyone clap for me. You have to kind of walk us through how you were able to do so and explain along the way. Like they were closing costs. Well, what's a closing cost? Somebody might ask, and then people will answer. And so that is how I get my community used to the fact that you're not the only one that doesn't know to ask for help. It's okay not to know a term, but don't stay not knowing. Share that you don't know, because I promise someone else is reading thinking, I'm so glad she asked that because I had no idea what she was talking about. And then also too, whenever I teach, I do a lot of lives and a lot of sessions, even in my book, Get Good with Money. I'm very conscious that as I use a word to go and explain it, because the teacher in me, that is my natural nature, right?
Yeah.
To say a thing, and I kind of think to myself, they're going to be like, what does that mean? So to say it, but then explain it, and then continue to explain it along the way until we normalize that definition.
Yeah, I can totally relate. And I think it's because I was raised by teachers. Both of my parents were educators, and I feel very much the same way. I mean, I can hear myself in my head on reporting calls where I'm talking to people who are so brilliant about whatever sector of personal finance they work in, and saying to them over and over again, whoa, you have to slow down. I do not get this. You please just take a step back and explain it to me from the beginning, because if we don't understand it, then we can't get into it. Then we can't, make it a part of our plan. And that is really, really an important lesson to carry forward. So I'm glad that you feel that way with the group that you're running, and I'm sure that there's tons in the book that we can bring forward in that way. When you look out into the future as we come out of this pandemic, what do you think the big challenges are going to be?
I think some of the big challenges when we come out of this pandemic are there going to be some industries that just don't recover. It's just not going to be the same, and they won't have the funds. They won't have the ability to bring everyone back on in, like whether it's the restaurant industry, or it's the entertainment industry. Maybe people are not really wanting to go to movie theaters anymore, and they really do want to just lean into streaming. What does that mean? So I think that's going to be a huge challenge for people who've invested their whole lives in education in certain industries, that they might find that they're just not able to get work in that industry. But I'm also concerned about housing. So I live in New Jersey, and I mean, I own my home, and I've seen like the value just skyrocket because New York is right next door. And so many New Yorkers, living outside was part of it. So you live in this super tiny apartment, but you spend a lot of time at restaurants and parks, but pandemic and quarantine found that you had to stay in this tight little spot, and people are like, no more. So they've now come over to Jersey and are buying up a lot of homes, and unfortunately there's not much inventory. It's the inventory is short by like almost 20%, the last statistics that I read. So you have all these new buyers and less inventory. So that means there's high demand, low product. That means the price of the products have gone up. But does that really mean that house is actually worth more? Is that sustainable? And so there's a worry there that, will folks have bought too much? Will we see a housing bubble later on down the line when the market corrects, when the housing market corrects itself? Meaning that, you're like, oh, you bought this house for $600,000 in 2021, but honestly, it was really worth more, $500,000. So now you see a withdrawal of some of your equity. So there's a concern there as well. And just folks not being able to recover. So what happens, and I interviewed the director of economic something or other at the White House, and Mr. Kamen, and I asked him this question. I said, well, so I know that I think it's September 21st, mortgage moratoriums, that's gone. And then I think October 31st, right? You have to start paying your student loans again. So what happens if I still don't have a job? And then what if I have not been paying my mortgage for these almost 2 years? Where does that money go? Does it go get tacked on to the back of my mortgage, and my payment is either extended beyond the 30 years or my mortgage payment is inflated monthly? And so that's a huge, huge concern. So when all of these the safety nets that were kind of holding us together are taking away, will people fall? And so that's a concern.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And in regards to that mortgage in particular, if you are on a more, if you're not making your payments right now, it's really, really important to reach out to your lender and talk about it, what happens on the back end, because there are choices, there are different programs that they will funnel you into, and you need to understand what's coming before it actually hits you 100%. The other big worry, and I think gap in the system that has become so apparent in this pandemic is in caregiving, in not just caring for kids who are home remote schooling, but taking care of older parents. And part of the reason that so many women have stepped back from the workforce is for these caregiving needs. I know that you have been playing a big role in the finances of your parents over the last couple of years. And it sounds to me, at least as you told me your story, that you've been doing it successfully. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit about how you think we can all help our older relatives if we get called into that situation?
Certainly. So, well, one, you're going to want to make sure that your finances are in a decent space and place, because it's very hard to pour from an empty cup. And so I made sure to sit down with my husband and to work out our financials. Like, what, do we have enough a month? Do we have enough savings for emergency savings? Are we setting aside for our future? Because you don't want to break your financial system in an effort to save someone else's, and then you both are broken. So that was first. And then second, starting to have the conversation. So even before all of this happened to the world, I was having these conversations with my parents about where do they stand financially, how are they doing? In the beginning, sometimes it's just like, how are you guys doing? Is everything okay? Do you need anything? Because it can be difficult asking parents who kind of told you what to do your whole life. And now you feel like, am I supposed to tell them what to do? So you want to start having kind of like the gentler version of these conversations. And then once I did that, it was not always easy, because my father was a CFO and an accountant. So I remember I wanted him to meet with a certified financial planner to help them plan like their final phase out. My dad's been retired for some time, but my mom wanted to retire, and she was open to it. She was a nurse and he was not, because he was like, what are they going to tell me? I know how to manage our finances. I was a CFO, I was a CFPA. Like, there's nothing that they're going to tell. I'm not paying anyone to tell me anything about my money. So I was like, okay, because that's still your father, And so that was not, and so I was like, okay, that's not the right way to go about it. So I dropped that conversation, but I would still ask how they were doing, and my father mentioned one day, because my sisters and I, we give him money every month, and mostly that he uses that money to help our other family members who are here and abroad. My parents were born and raised in Nigeria. And so he mentioned something like, oh, this came just in time. And it was like my ears perked up. So you also want to be listening. Mm-hmm. And I thought, just in time, I've never heard my father say just in time, because he really planned out their retirement well. But then I found out that my mother wanted to actually retire earlier than they planned, because nursing was just really hard on the body. It just is. So the plan did not include her retiring earlier. He thought by then they would have paid out the house, because they took out another mortgage on the home in an effort to pay my sister, the baby. I'm one of 5 girls, and they sent us all to college and paid for it, most of it. And so they took money out for her schooling. So he wanted to pay that off. And so realizing that wasn't going to happen, because she was retiring sooner rather than later, it caused a shift in their financial plans. And so that he had not planned for. So once he said that, it allowed me to sit down and say, is everything okay? Do you need us to help a little bit more? And, I asked him, I was like, do you have a budget? I knew he did, because he always, since I was a kid, he had this manila notebook where he had like his budget. And I was like, well, would you feel comfortable sharing it with me? And he said, okay. I was like, okay. Yes, I was surprised. But I guess he realized, there is a struggle here. And I realized that they were, like what they were bringing in for retirement was going to be short around the amount that the mortgage was. And so I spoke to my husband and asked him, because we were really good. We've been really good savers, really good investors. And so we had enough to pay off their mortgage. And I asked my husband, what did he think? Because you always want to make sure that if you have a partner, that, in line. And he was like, yes, his mother passed away when he was in his 20s. And he was like, I would have loved to be able to do something like this for her. And so we told my parents that we'll be able to pay your mortgage off. And my dad could not believe it because I was kind of the wild child when I was younger. So they were
I
like,
can believe that. That I can believe.
Of the 5 girls, they were like, he was like, this one? Wow. And so he did not believe it at first. Like my dad was like, there's no way there's no way that Tiffany, because he just knew me like as Tiffany, the teacher. I don't think he understood what I did as a budgetista. He still doesn't. But so we paid it off that weekend. He said he must have called the hotline or his bank at least 20 times just to hear your balance is 0. He's just like, I just couldn't believe it. But it gave him the space. But if I had not had those previous conversations with them, and we weren't talking, about money before that, it was going to be hard to make that transition into knowing more so I can help, So that's what I just suggest for people, like start to have those conversations now when it's safe.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I was on the phone just yesterday with my mother who said, I want to add you to this account. And it was that simple conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to have it that simply and that briefly
Mm-hmm.
because we've had so many conversations
Yes.
in the past. Like I think people need to realize this is not one and done. It's
No.
not one and done with your kids. It's not one and done with your spouse. Certainly it's not one and done with your parents,
Mm-hmm.
and it shouldn't be one and done with your community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are conversations we should all be having, particularly among women, I think, all the time.
I agree, because it makes it easier to have the hard ones because you've laid the foundation with the easier ones so you can make that transition and people feel like it's a safe space because they have previous history to say, well, we've talked about things like this before and it's gone well. I can trust that it will continue to go well.
100%. So before I let you go, I want a little bit of a sneak peek of this book. You mentioned that there are 10 elements in this holistic money plan, 10
Yes.
things that you 10 boxes that you have to check in order to have taken care of yourself and your financial needs holistically. What's the one that people are going to be surprised by?
I think I'll tell you the one that surprised me, so it might surprise people. I didn't think, maybe because I just turned 40, I never really thought of insurance. Yes. I mean, I knew, of course, I'm like, okay, yes, health insurance and your car insurance and even some life insurance, but I didn't realize there were so many other insurances that I should have. And so when I met with my certified financial planner, Aliche, she was like, you're underinsured. I'm like, how's that? I mean, I've got like health insurance, my husband's got great health insurance. And I think I have a policy. She's like, yes, but all of these policies, Tiffany, you put in place when you were 26. I was like a super finance nerd. And like, I remember being like adamant that I had to get my insurances together at like 26. But I never updated anything. And here I was 40 and married now. And so like, yes, the coverage I had was great for a 26-year-old, but not for a 40-year-old. And so like, I think that's what's going to surprise people the most, to understand like there are insurances you want to look into. There's disability, there's health, there's life insurance, and you might need an umbrella policy, but that insurance is there is to protect you and your assets just in case. And I think people will be surprised that they might realize, I don't have the coverage that I need. I never really thought about it beyond the basic insurances that normally people talk about.
Right. And as you carry that concept into retirement, and we like to talk about a protected source of income, knowing that when you combine Social Security with whatever money you can count on having come in on a regular basis, like it's a paycheck, you'll know that you've covered your fixed expenses. You'll know that you'll be able to keep a roof over your head and food on the table and health insurance at the ready should you absolutely need it. So I think you're 100% right on that. You are a joy. The book I haven't read it yet, but I am sure it is fantastic and we can't wait. Tell us a little bit more about where we can find more information on you, on the Budgetnista, on the Dream Catchers.
So I am the Budgetnista on every social platform, on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. I have a podcast if you want to learn more at Brown Ambition, and I'm available at budgetnista.com. And if you want to get good with money, honey, you can go to getgoodwithmoney.com and pre-order now. Thank you, Jean, for having me. This has been awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. And for anybody who is listening, if you'd like to get your hands on that guide to the language of annuities, you can find it at protectedincome.org. I'm Jean Chatzky. We will see you next time.